How about now? Do we have sound? Hopefully you can hear me now. Let me know if you can. Give me a thumbs up or not. Okay, all right, we're good to go. Great. My phone is doing funny things. All right, sign of the times. So again, welcome everyone to tonight's Fireside Chat. Welcome revolutionaries, welcome resistors, welcome citizens of America and the planet. So tonight we're going to talk about all the incredible things that are going on right now. It's a very exciting time. As you may know, we've been saying on this program for some time that hold on to your hats, Donald Trump's days are numbered, and I think we're continuing to see that play out. Before we get started, I want to try something new, and that is to get your input here. As if we were sitting in the same room having a fireside chat, I thought it would be good to get some feedback from you, to hear from you as if we're in that same room, as to where you'd like to take our conversation tonight. And there are a couple of timely things I'd like to set out for you, and I would love you to just make a quick comment on the Facebook page here. Just let me know which of these topics you'd especially like to discuss. So the first option is to talk about Donald Trump, what's going on, how does this relate to our democracy, how does this relate to Russia, security, privacy, how does this relate to the potential for an impeachment proceeding to go forward? So if you want to talk about Trump, just write in your comment there, post a comment, Trump, okay? If you would like to focus on GMOs and Monsanto, because the march against Monsanto is coming up this weekend, and you know it's time to revisit what's going on with GMOs and Monsanto and their collusion, it appears, with the EPA to suppress an actual scientific review of what is known about Roundup, the pesticide that accompanies, needs to be used with their GMOs. So we could talk about Monsanto. So if you want to hear about Monsanto, just post that in your comment. Do you want to talk about Chelsea Manning, who took her first steps back into the world of freedom? She who did so much to protect our freedoms, our freedom from spying, from invasion of privacy, from violation of our constitutional rights, and in particular did so much to hold our government accountable for its spying, its violations of international law, its war crimes. Give a shout out if you would like to hear about, if you would like to focus on Chelsea and perhaps other whistleblowers too. Barrett Brown, as you may know, is now out of jail and under house arrest. Barrett Brown, who was in jail for 4 years, allegedly for conspiring with hackers, but he didn't actually hack. What he did was post information on the web. He helped to crowdsource a hack into several security corporations, these big security corporations that were violating our privacy, that were doing some very outrageous things, that were essentially conducting fake news on crack, not fake news on steroid, but fake news on crack, in particular against Glenn Greenwald and against WikiLeaks, sort of making up stories in order to set them up for prosecution, essentially. And Barrett Brown exposed that. So that's another interesting thing we could be talking about. Yeah, so there's 4 choices for you. Let me just quickly review what you would like to do here. So let me just see. So Riley Frost is saying, hi Jill from Miami, Florida. These are just shout outs to Osun Wanika from Kansas. Thanks for tuning in, Osun. And Donna Quinton, hola. Jill, sending love from Baja California, Mexico. So, comments about topics. Kennedy Simonetti says, net neutrality is under threat of corporate privatization. Dustin Gleason says net neutrality. Mario Diaz is saying Monsanto. Jim Folsom wants to talk about GMOs. Sandra Deal wants to talk about GMOs. Wow. More on net neutrality, some on impeachment. All right, so you know what? I am glad to hear that that you're up for all of this. There's interest in all these topics. So let's try to cover several of them. And another shout out here from Alif Love saying, yay, welcome home, Chelsea. And likewise, Andy F. Lee wants to talk about Chelsea. So a lot of interested folks here in the good stuff. So yeah, let's get down to it. First, a few words about Chelsea Manning. So Chelsea Manning, as you know, is a hero for many of us, certainly for myself. Glenn Greenwald discussed Chelsea Manning's upcoming release recently and talked about Chelsea Manning's role as an absolute hero. The incredible injustice that Chelsea Manning was sentenced to an astounding 35 years for basically blowing the whistle, for being a whistleblower and revealing really critical things about what our government is doing. Chelsea Manning got 35 years. Normally, the experts say you would usually get about 1 year. Chelsea Manning got 35 after 7 years, including much of that in solitary confinement under torturous conditions, undergoing her gender transition in a male prison, committing suicide attempts several times along the way. This was just an absolute tragedy and shame that a person who committed such self-sacrifice in order to stand up for our constitutional rights had to go through that kind of abuse. So it's really a tribute to Chelsea Manning's spirit, her perseverance, her high moral compass, that she has survived, she's made it through, she's coming out on the other end, and is a tribute to all of you who stood up for her and stood up for our civil liberties. Some of the things that Chelsea Manning exposed, and this comes from an article in The Nation several years ago, in 2013 actually, by Greg Mitchell, who just gave a list, which is incredible. You can Google that article, or maybe we'll post it. But among other things, so Chelsea Manning, of course, released the collateral murder video, in which something like 11 people were killed, including, I believe, some journalists, which was, you know, it was like a video game being played by forces remotely, I believe, that essentially gunned these people down really without cause, without clearance, without justification. That really began a, the releases. That was really the first thing that came out from Chelsea Manning's releases. Chelsea Manning revealed that Egypt was involved in torture, and that the people who were torturing in Egypt, in fact, were trained by none other than the FBI. Manning revealed a State Department memo that basically said that the U.S.-backed coup in Honduras in 2009 was illegal and unconstitutional, even though our government continues to support that coup government, continues to arm it, send it military aid, and so on. Chelsea Manning revealed that Tunisia was basically an illegitimate elite that was skimming the economy, that was really taking advantage, the royal family was taking advantage of the people of Tunisia, and that there was massive corruption going on. And the U.S. knew about this corruption as far back as 2006, but went on supporting the Tunisian government and making it the pillar of U.S. North Africa policy. The list goes on. The oil giant Shell claimed that it had inserted staff, quote, unquote, inserted staff and infiltrated Nigeria's government. Another just incredible shame and outrage that the United States and U.S. corporations were jointly involved in. Again, the U.S. government was pressuring the EU to change its policies to accept GMOs, which we'll be talking about momentarily when we get to Monsanto. Further, that Afghanistan was a mess, a hotbed of bribery, extortion, and embezzlement, where we were spending, hundreds of billions of dollars, countless lives, both the Afghan and American lives, and also shocking levels of U.S. spying at the United Nations were also revealed, and that our diplomats were being used abroad as intelligence gathering devices, essentially. So a number of things that Chelsea Manning revealed, which we very badly needed to know. And it's very important that we not forget what we have learned through these revelations so that we can act on them. And I think Chelsea Manning's revelations have not been acted on. And it's very important that these violations of international law, these war crimes, these violations of privacy, and the massive use of spying be addressed and be dealt with. So for all of that, we owe an enormous debt of thanks to Chelsea Manning, and it's great that she is receiving a hero's welcome now from so many people. And I want to give her a personal shout out from all of us here at the Green News Network. Welcome home, Chelsea. Well done. We support you. We're grateful. And we look forward to continuing to build a more honest and secure and humanitarian democracy that we deserve here in this country and around the world. Thank you, Chelsea Manning. Let me just say a few quick things about Barrett Brown, since we're talking about whistleblowers who've been released. Barrett Brown, as I mentioned before, demonstrated collusion between private security contractors, the Department of Justice, and private corporations in going after private citizens, making up stories about them, and seeking to essentially get them in trouble. You may have noticed that there's been a war, for example, against the campaign for food sovereignty, food security, and those people who want to hold Monsanto accountable. There's been a definite drop-off in the public discussion in the anti-Monsanto campaign. And we see things, for example, like where the official at the EPA has been exposed as colluding with Monsanto in order to prevent studies from going forward to reveal the true dangers of the pesticide, Roundup, glyphosate. So anyhow, how all this pertains to Barrett Brown is that Barrett Brown really revealed that there's a lot of collusion going on behind closed doors, which is generating this fake news on crack that's being used to try to sideline, to discredit, and to tarnish the reputation of advocates for food security, for food justice, advocates who, peace advocates. We know in the same way that the FBI has spied on the Veterans for Peace and called them extremists for peace. Thank you, Pat Scanlon from the Veterans for Peace, for writing a wonderful song about that, which I urge you to Google. But, you know, this begins to reveal some of the method behind these disinformation campaigns, which so many of us have been victims of, and we can go into that more another time. But suffice it to say, I think we owe Barrett Brown a huge burden of thanks as well for really revealing some of what's going on here with these smear campaigns, these efforts to discredit activists and people of integrity across the board. So again, thank you so much to Barrett Brown for standing up. He's talked about wanting to leave the country because he's feeling so discouraged that it's very hard to make forward progress when so many of the forces, from the deep state to American corporations, to the corporate media, are all aligned against people like Barrett Brown, whistleblowers and activists and advocates. But I hope we can change his tune, because we need powerful whistleblowers, we need advocates for justice to stick around and be a part of the team, because there's no escaping the predator state. You know, it will follow you wherever. It's not like a border is going to protect you. The only thing that's going to protect you is democracy, and all of us standing up together for all of our civil liberties and our civil rights. A couple quick words about Monsanto. If I can move my cat, Willie, here, so I can take a look at my notes. And by the way, it's about 80 degrees here in Boston, about 20 degrees warmer than normal. So again, you know, heads up about things to come. So hang on just one second while we push through here. Okay, so on Monsanto, you know, Monsanto, for those who don't know, is a giant multinational corporation that produces GMO seeds, that is genetically modified seeds, and toxic pesticides that go with those seeds. And that includes not only Roundup glyphosate, which the World Health Organization has identified as a probable cause of cancer in human beings. It's also, you know, accompanied by the neonicotinoids, that is the pesticides that have been linked to the bee colony collapsing disorder. I think, you know, the evidence isn't entirely in on that, but there are many red flags about that, shall we say, to say the least. There are serious red flags, actually about all pesticides, in my view. These are inherently toxic substances that poison essential components, usually in the nervous system. So this is not something that we should have to prove danger for in order to start protecting people or our food supply. This should be just how, this should be part of the game and how it works. Now, hang on one second here. For some reason, my computer seems to be on the blink here. Let's see if we can get it back so that I can read your questions. Hang on just one moment. All right, who knows? Maybe maybe the NSA has decided I've said too much. Okay, well, my computer's coming back on. We'll give it a moment. In the meantime, we still have contact. And just finishing up on Monsanto, the other thing that many people don't know about Monsanto is that it's also a producer of deadly chemical weapons and has been a major producer of Agent Orange and white phosphorus, and used not only way back in the war in Vietnam, but also more recently. White phosphorus is one of those agents which has been horrifically used in Gaza. I believe it was also used in Central America, if I'm not mistaken, in El Salvador. I believe. So, all of this we have Monsanto to thank for. Monsanto seeds are a real threat to the environment for many reasons, not only because industrial agriculture is a bad thing, because of the monocropping and the use of fossil fuels and the destruction of ecosystems and open space and so on, but also because of its inordinate uses of water. And in particular, what Monsanto does is reduce the seed supply. So instead of having a diverse, plentiful assortment of seeds, say of corn or of soy or cotton, which are the major products and uses of GMO seeds, instead they narrow that diversity of seeds down to just a couple, like a handful of varieties, which is not nature's insurance policy. Nature's insurance policy is to have diversity, so that the species, the substance, corn or soy, can survive if there's a change in weather or climate or soil conditions, etc. You want to have a diverse variety so that one form or another will survive. So all of this is a problem because Monsanto threatens the livelihood of farmers. We have seen hundreds of thousands of farmers actually committing suicide in India alone, where as third world farmers they become entrapped by Monsanto's dominance of the seed supply and then the expenses that go into maintaining that sort of farming. So all of that has been a incredible disaster in real time. And all of that is reasons why Monsanto is actually a threat to our food, our health, and our democracy. That's why we need food sovereignty. That's why we need a sustainable food system. And fundamentally, that's why we need a democracy where our politicians are not being funded by the likes of Monsanto and its campaign contributions or its lobbyists, and where we put a stop to the revolving door so that the Monsanto officials are not revolving into positions on regulatory agencies like the FDA, for example, where Monsanto has held high positions. So all of these are reasons why we need to keep standing up and fighting and keep pushing ahead. Hold on one moment now while I try to get back to your questions here with getting into my computer, which is coming back. Just need to type in my password. Good, we're in luck. Okay, it's opening up. A couple more things about Trump, because I did not manage to get to Trump, but let's just summarize. Hold on one moment here while I try to get your questions back. Okay, here we go. Aha, very interesting. I've lost my Wi-Fi, so is this a little hack attack here going on? Let's see. Hopefully we can get the Wi-Fi back. Interesting how these things, I mean, this hasn't happened to me, in weeks. Interesting that it should happen just now. And let me see if I can bring up your questions. Okay, they are coming. So quickly, just a last couple of words about what's going on with Donald Trump. As you may know, he fired James Comey, the head of the FBI, last week, and after flip-flopping on the explanations coming out of the White House, Trump finally admitted that, yes, this had everything to do with wanting to stop the investigation into his dealings with Russia. And, it certainly smacks of a cover-up. And hold on one second, let me just close this. Smacks of a cover-up. It was then followed by the revelation this week that he not only fired Comey, but before that he had asked Comey to please not investigate Michael Flynn, his former head of national security. So, it sort of looks like two efforts to interfere with an investigation, which some people would call an obstruction of justice. Some people have said, yes, this definitely meets the threshold for impeachment. In my own view, I think this president has long violated the Constitution, the Emoluments Clause, which says you can't be taking money from other governments. I think he has violated that. He has certainly trodden on the freedom of the press, on the independence of the judiciary by other firings, for example, of the acting Attorney General Sally Yates, who was fired because she wouldn't go along with Trump's Muslim ban, his travel ban. I think he has undermined the separation of branches of government, and he has certainly violated our values and our human rights. So I personally feel like an impeachment investigation has long been justified. With these new developments now, I think a lot of other people are beginning to feel that there is the potential for this to lead towards an impeachment proceedings. And it's interesting that the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, just basically gave the thumbs up, agreeing that we had to follow the facts where they lead. Where they lead, I think, at this point, we don't exactly know. Is Donald Trump covering up his collusion with Russia? We don't have evidence to that effect at this point. Is he covering up his collusion with oligarchs or with crony capitalists or with mafiosos? Maybe not in Russia, maybe somewhere else. There's a lot Donald Trump has been covering up for quite a while, including by refusing to release his tax returns. So, if it looks like a duck, it smells like a duck, and it talks like a duck, i.e. that this guy's hiding something that would be incriminating. If it looks like a duck, it just might be a duck. And I think there are enough red flags now that this needs to move ahead. And I think it's great that the investigation is going forward. At the same time, important to be really level-headed here. This is not something to go to war about. We know from the recent ransomware episode where so many computers, hundreds of thousands of computers in something like 150 countries and more around the world were shut down by this ransomware. We know that hacking is a big thing. Hacking is going on all the time. The state of Utah, in fact, reports they get 20 million hacks a day, okay? So it wouldn't be surprising to hear that, Russia is hacking us or that we are hacking Russia, in the same way that Chelsea Manning exposed that we are spying on diplomats around the world. There's a lot of this going on. We need a generic and a systemic solution. That's the last thing I want to say before we go to your questions. The president of Microsoft proposed some months back, but it came up again after this ransomware episode, which, by the way, comes from a U.S. hacking tool, a CIA hacking tool that got leaked that's now being used against everybody, everywhere, essentially. This comes out of U.S. spying and hacking tools and instruments. So, this is kind of a big mess here, a big mess where everybody's spying on each other. We need a systemic solution, and that's what the president of Microsoft actually came out with, a suggestion that we actually have a sort of Geneva summit to look into an international treaty in order to deal with this He called it a digital Geneva Convention, in fact, a digital Geneva Convention to deal with this absolute mess of hacks and counter hacks. We need a systemic solution. Everybody's gotten their hands dirty in this, and it's really important that this not be cause for further inflaming the new McCarthyism, the new Cold War. In fact, Russia and China have been trying to push for an international treaty against cyber warfare for some time, and the U.S. has been dragging its feet on it. So it's time for all of us to get on board and have a true systemic solution here. And let's get to the bottom of this. Now, finally, to your questions and your comments. Okay, let's see. GMOs are so safe, they spend millions preventing the labeling on them. Good point. That's from Robert Simpson. Jesse Schaffer. And by the way, when you post, if you could also post where you're from, just so we can give a shout out to you, knowing where you are, it would be awesome. Jesse Schaffer says, Monsanto is polluting the seed market and forcing good farmers to destroy their crops while grabbing larger market shares. Their agenda is to continue to sell heavy chemicals in growing amounts which build up in our ecosystem and have effects for decades. Thank you, Jesse. So well said. Valerie Ross. Winona LaDuke mentioned Monsanto during her lecture when she came to New York City as part of Indigenous Food, I believe that says. And yes, absolutely, a shout out to our Indigenous brothers and sisters for protecting our ecosystems, for doing what they can to protect our food supply. Indigenous people all over the world really are playing such an important role in protecting the diversity of our food system and the diversity of our seeds. So thank you to our Indigenous brothers and sisters for your resistance. Ray Felix, Monsanto Foods should have labels. I agree with you 100%. Nadia Cabrera, they used it in Puerto Rico too in the rainforest, Agent Orange. That's horrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. One of many absolute outrages of colonialism. Jesse Schaefer, monocropping was a major contributing factor to the Dust Bowl. Never forget. Very good point. We've been here before. We need to learn from it. Joshua Gerloff says glyphosate is being used the way lead was. They knew lead was poisonous for about 150 years before banning it. Absolutely. Very true. Ron Forbes, then they sue small farmers that resist their use. Pollination can naturally lead to contamination of organic crops. Absolutely. That's why our campaign, our party, the Green Party, supports a moratorium on all GMOs until they have been proven safe. And good luck proving it safe. It's not an easy thing to do, but we should not be putting all of humanity and our food supply and our ecosystems at risk for the kind of destruction that could come from this reckless experiment. Connor Evans, and the subsidies from the U.S. to the grain cartels, which allows them to produce food below cost. Absolutely, we're subsidizing the wrong stuff. And the WTO striking down trade barriers that are erected to try to block the dumping of staple crops. Absolutely, Connor. Very good point that the global trade agreements also dismantle our ability to protect ourselves from the lowest common denominator. So other countries that are not protecting, like the U.S. is not protecting. There are over 20 countries around the world that either don't produce GMO crops or won't allow them to be imported. And we here in the U.S. are kind of the lowest common denominator. We don't protect. We do not even label. That's an outrage. So go on the web and find your nearest March Against Monsanto this weekend. It's on Saturday. And join in that march. There will be one here in Boston. I urge you to turn out and support it. And let's see if we can take one or two final ones. Hang on one second. Trump comments. Okay, George Atoni says, impeachment. Robert Simpson says, how do we know Russia was involved? From NSA tapes of their phone? Well, you make a really good point there. If Russia was involved, we probably do have tapes. And in fact, this is a point that the former head of NSA technology and security, William Binney, makes this point exactly, that if the Russians were involved, that U.S. security agents have that specific information, but they apparently don't. So were they involved? Right now the evidence is it's circumstantial, and it includes digital fingerprints and the use of Cyrillic letters and things like that. It's not exactly stuff you would expect to hold up in court, yet that is being held up as if it is proof positive. So I think there are many doubts. I don't think we're at the bottom of this. And is this what Trump is trying to cover up? Or is he trying to cover up his other forms of collusion, that is with Russian oligarchs or mafiosos, or perhaps from Eastern Europe or somewhere else? Okay, Matthew Bridwell says, do you believe it will be a fair review by former FBI director? That is, I think a question that we have to ask. When we hear about the revelations that we've seen, from Chelsea Manning, the revelations that showed that the FBI was involved in actually teaching agents in Egypt how to conduct torture. When we hear Barrett Brown's revelations, when we see Barrett Brown's revelations, because these were emails, hacked emails that he didn't hack, but he crowdsourced them, that showed that U.S. security corporations, in fact, were making up stories with the assistance of the DOJ. It does raise concerns. And let me just say that these concerns aren't coming out of nowhere. We know very well, going back a long time, but a year and a half ago, there were polls showing that 90% of Americans said that they had lost confidence in American institutions, including the judiciary, the executive, and Congress. Polls show the same about the press. There's about a 30 or 35% confidence rate in the corporate media. So, who do we trust? This is a question that I think reflects on this existential crisis in American society and in American government. The solution to that crisis is to ensure that we start with integrity and that our politics and our elected officials are not corrupted by big money, by corporations, by bribes, by lobbyists, by super PACs, etc. I think we need to start clean, and we're off here, I'm afraid, in a moment. So I'm going to have to wrap up there. Let's see. Okay, so I'm looking for a message here from Mel, which I think I have. And by the way, big shout out to Mel Figueroa, who is our assistant on the Green News Network. Thank you so much, Mel, for your help engineering tonight and your help weeding through comments and all that. And it's been great talking with you. Next week, I will post in advance a variety of topics that we could focus on, and would welcome your comments in advance, and also welcome your comments online as we talk. The more we can make this like a living room, and the more we can make this like a real fireside chat, all the better. I think it's way more interesting when it's not a monologue and it's a dialogue, and the more of us we can bring into that, the better. So a big shout out to all of you for standing up and leading the charge to an America and a world that works for all of us. And keep coming back to the Green News Network. If you can be sure to like this and share this and help us get the word out so that we can keep working together to take back our democracy and the peaceful, just, green future that depends on it. Thank you all so much. Green news is good news. Good night.